This is Eric Hayes, sitting here in Meigs County, Ohio, brought to you by Athens Conservation District on behalf of Camp Canopy. These times, we're found having to find ourselves at home and enjoying our backyard a little bit more. Tree ID is a big thing, especially when you look out across this little landscape here and you look and you see all these different trees. Why might someone want to be able to identify those trees? Well, for me, I sit here and I want to know what I'm looking at. So for instance, I can write off my hand and tell you I have sugar maple, black cherry, black walnut, hickory, elm, chestnut oak, and a few others. I won't keep naming them all. But it takes some time and you got to learn to be able to do that. So how do we identify trees? Well, we'll take you out there to the field here in a second and see if we can't show you a couple trees. But there's one other thing I want to throw in there. It's not all just about the trees. When I look out here, I could be looking from a mindset of someone that might like to hunt or viewing of wildlife. We've got all sorts of birds out here. You may be able to hear them over top of the cars in the background, you may not. But I've heard a quail sound off here, and to me, I want to know how to give that quail proper habitat. So one of the first steps in that is being able to understand what trees that quail needs in its habitat. And you can't determine what trees you have until you learn how to identify those trees. So without further ado, let's head to the field. Notice, and name a canopy, I'm gonna wear the sweater just so you can see the logo. So you can see that we have these awesome shirts and sweatshirts. Also rocking the Camp Canopy there and a little bit of a sweat stain. But if everybody's watching this video and enjoys it at all or enjoys camp, they're gonna know that they wanna represent camp. And the only way to do that is to get one of these shirts. So for you guys, I will wear this sweater. It's about 85 plus degrees, humidity unknown, but very high. It's Ohio. So we're gonna go out there. I'm gonna wear this for you guys. But just know, you gotta buy yourself one or two.
Hey, it's Jeremy again. So one of the cool things about being a forester is you never know what kind of woods you're gonna end up in. And some days you just don't know what you're gonna find. And my wife and I bought this house about 8 years ago, about 2.5 acres of woods behind it. Never imagining that the woods was going to have anything special. Till one day we went for a walk, and this is what we found. About a 30-foot waterfall. So we're hanging out in my front yard a little bit more this afternoon. I wanted to show you one of my favorite trees, which is this one. This is bald cypress. Bald cypress is a very fast-growing conifer. The unique thing about it, it is a deciduous conifer. Deciduous means that it loses its needles in the fall. So this is the tree that everybody thinks dies each year and then it comes back to life. But the needles all turn brown, they fall off. It looks like a barren tree, and then come springtime it leaves back out, and that's what this one is still currently doing. It has a very unique feather-like needle arrangement. They're flat instead of rounded like some of the other conifers are. It's almost like a feather. Focus is an issue again, but very flat like a feather, very soft. If you've ever heard of cypress knees, these get them, and they're like little wooden nodules that grow up out of the roots. Some people say that it is for stabilization because the tree grows in wet soils. Other people think it's for gaseous exchange, but they are pretty cool. This tree isn't old enough to have any yet. It is growing right near a wet spot, which is what these trees happen to like, because they love water. They'll actually grow in standing water. So it's a great tree to plant if you got a wet spot in your yard, or if you're reforesting an area that's really, really wet. Bald cypress is certainly a tree to consider. Now you're all probably familiar with black walnut. This is the tree's sister, white walnut, otherwise known as butternut. Now leaf-wise, the trees look pretty similar. You've got this long rachis right here with a series of leaves on it. Now these were Spring's a little late this year, so these aren't leafed out fully yet. They've got a really cool leaf scar. Leaf scar is right here. Some people think they look like a monkey face. This one's grown over. There's a good picture of one. Big, huge leaf scar where the leaf used to be. But the butternut has a very smooth bark when it's younger. When it gets older, it looks like you've taken a black walnut and scraped the bark down and kind of painted the ridges gray. This is a young one. This one's only about 6-7 years old. It did come up as 2. Somebody might have mowed over it at one point in time. Don't know who that would have been, but kind of a cool tree. One of my favorite trees to find in the woods. It's butternut. So butternut is pretty rare. It's pretty uncommon. It never grew as often in the woods as black walnut does. You go in the woods, you find a whole grove of black walnut trees. You might find 30 or 40 trees, but butternut, you might find 3 or 4 in the woods. It's just never a real common tree. It is getting attacked by a non-native fungus. We call it butternut decline. It causes black oozing cankers in the bark and in the trunk that eventually can cause rot and kill the tree. So it doesn't have a good outlook. We protect them on state forests, encourage landowners to plant them just to kind of help keep the species going a little bit longer. So this is black walnut. You see how the bark's a lot rougher than the butternut was. It's also more brown when it does get younger and smoother. It's brown where the butternut was more gray. These trees are pretty young too. They've been moved a couple times. Unfortunately, when we moved to a new house, we had to dig them up and move them. But they're starting to grow pretty good. And one of the things we always talk about is the form of young trees. And this big crook in it doesn't bother me a bit, because by the time this tree is 20 inches in diameter, you won't see that anymore. But again, just like the butternut does, these leaves have a long rachis. It's a compound leaf with multiple leaflets on it, and has that unique leaf scar, like I showed you. Find it here. We can get focus to work. That unique leaf scar that we saw on the butternut is also here and present. There it is. On the black walnut. Timber is very valuable, as you probably know. It's kind of a softer hardwood, but it has that deep brown chocolate color that woodworkers love to work with. So what we're looking at now is black cherry, or wild cherry is another name for it. It has a very simple leaf with a very finely serrated leaf edge. Very finely serrated. At first glance, you don't even notice it. One of the easy ways to distinguish young trees or even branches of black cherry is to look for these little dots in the twig. These little white dots in the twig are called lenticels, and they're used for gas exchange. And it's just fruit trees have them, but when we're out in the woods looking at timber, it's going to be one of the few trees that actually have this. Black cherry is also distinguishable by the bark. This one's open grown, so it looks a little bit different, but when they're older, they get real black and flaky, and when they're younger, they're a little bit smoother, and sometimes you can still see the lenticels. So I wanted to bring you down in the woods here to another black cherry so you can see a little more characteristic bark. One thing I was taught in college is to think of burnt cornflakes. And if you think of the bark of black cherry, it looks an awful lot like somebody glued a bunch of burnt cornflakes to it. And again, younger trees are going to have smoother bark. You can see there. Hey guys, I just wanted to show you a beech tree. I didn't know we were going to find a beech tree here in the woods today. So this is one of the leaves on American beech. One of the most distinguishing things about it is the veins in the leaf are perpendicular and they're really straight. And one of the ways we can remember this tree is park at the beach, because the veins in the leaf look a lot like parking spots. So if you remember, park at the beach is one way to help you remember this. Now the bark of the beech tree is really smooth and gray. The light here isn't the greatest, but the one unique thing about the bark on beech is it stays smooth and gray through its whole life. A lot of trees, the bark changes as they get bigger. This is a tree you go in the woods and you see this huge 40-inch diameter tree with people's initials carved in it. And this is the tree. So the other unique thing about the beech, which is hard to see right now, but is the bud. And they kind of look like little cigars. And unfortunately, right now, they're not showing up because they have already left and formed a new leaf. So that is American beech. So I've already showed you beech, but it was a very, very small tree. Here's what a bigger beech looks like. And again, it keeps that gray, smooth bark through its whole lifespan. This tree's good 24 inches diameter. I got another one that I was leaning on. Very smooth gray bark, very hard wood. The nuts it produces, good for wildlife. There's leaf again, just for a reminder what it looks like. Remember, park at the beach.
So why don't you guys take a walk with me through my woods? So right in here, we have what's called an elm tree. We have two types of elms here in southeastern Ohio. And some people say this bark, when you peel it off, looks like an ice cream sandwich. But to me, what stands out about this bark is it kind of is soft as a sponge. But it also has a simple leaf that's what's known as doubly serrated. So if you look up close, it has a small serration per every big serration, which means there's two separate serrations going on there, doubly serrate on a simple leaf. It also feels kind of almost like Velcro-y to me. It'll even stick to you. To me, that's kind of what helps elms stand out. They are one of the hairiest, fuzziest, Velcro-y like leaves that I've ever felt. It's alternate as well, so don't forget that part. So right here, here's another one that, if you guys think back to Mad Buck, Maple Ash, Dogwood, or Buckeye, oppositely branched. This is one of you guys, a lot of you will be like, OH. That's right, IO. This is a Buckeye. You can see it's got a pretty unique leaf compared to most of the others. This is actually one whole leaf. This is what's known as palmately compound. It all centers from the origin like a palm. 5 leaves typically is on your Buckeye, pretty easy to tell. They've got a kind of a smell to them. This one's actually a young one from back here, a little bit of a more smooth bark to it. Puts off big old Buckeye nuts, another easy way to tell. So whenever you're looking and trying to do tree identification, make sure you look up, look down, and look all around. You may be able to find some Buckeyes. I'm going to venture on this one, you won't, because it's pretty young, so it's probably not producing fruits yet. So this tree here, it's not in the Mad Buck family, but it's alternately branched, which immediately tells you it's not a Maple Ash, Dogwood, or Buckeye, but it is a compound leaf. Some people would guess ash right off the bat because it looks pretty similar, but the leaves are a little bit different. This is one full leaf, compound leaf, gets complicated. These are what's known as leaflets. So this is on a shagbark hickory, and this is 5 leaflets per leaf. Sometimes it varies, but they tend to be pretty true with the number of leaflets per leaf, and that's one of the ways you can identify each hickory from each other one, because there's multiple different types of hickories. Another way is you can kind of see the bark on this hickory. It's starting to shag. And when it gets big, a lot of people can easily recognize this tree because the bark gets so shaggy on it. But one of the ways for me that's kind of easy to tell as well is if you look real close to these grooves on the hickory, and you may not be able to see this on the video, but pay attention as you're identifying. They almost make like some X cross shapes to me. And that's one of the easy ways that I've come to find outside of the bark being really shaggy. They put off hickory nuts, really good for wildlife, and in southeastern Ohio, these are one of our biggest managed for trees is an oak and hickory forest system. Good example of shagbark hickory. It's really got that shaggy bark. Most people can identify that, but if you can't, there's a really good way to identify it. So we decided to stop here. This is kind of one of my favorite spots, mostly because it helped provide me a little bit of food. But we talk about trees a lot and identifying them and what they're good for other than maybe building something or having them aesthetically to watch or look at and watch them grow. But for me, as you can see here, this is a spot where I like to hunt. I chose this spot because it's made up of a lot of oaks, so a lot of good early hard mast, which hard mast is the fruits that trees produce that are like hard nuts, like hickory nuts, acorns, buckeyes. This one has white oak in it and a little bit of scarlet and some red oak below. This is a really good spot where deer come to feed when the first acorns from white oak fall, if they produce for the year. And not only that, but this is a few nice trees that I really like, so I kind of find my my solstice in it, if you'll say, along with a palmately compound buckeye. I didn't tell you guys earlier what my tree stand was in, but knowing how to identify that tree is really crucial because it is in a white oak. They're some of the first ones to produce acorns in the season, early season. Deer, turkeys, rodents, birds, they all love them. Being able to identify them is critical. You know, seeing them as big trees, awesome if I wanted to get some white oak logs. But what if I wanted to regenerate some white oak in my stand? First, I need to find out, is there even any white oaks in my stand? Just being able to identify that leaf and the terminal buds that Jeremy will talk about, you can come up to this tree much like I did and find out this is a white oak. This is a white oak seedling. There's a few of them scattered throughout here, and that tells me there is oak regenerating in the stand. So if I wanted to do some silvicultural practices in here, maybe do some type of overstory removal or temporary openings, you'd be able to tell what trees are going to be likely to regenerate in that forest stand. So this tree here is pretty magnificent. It's one of my more pretty trees on the property here. This is a red oak. I don't know if you can see the ski trails that are up there. It's kind of the white marks that are going up and down. Looks like you'd be skiing down the edge. If I was an ant, I'd ski that. It'd be a pretty rad slope. This is a red oak. This is the only red oak leaf I could find down low, but as you might be able to see, it's got bristle tips, little tiny bristle tips on it. Unlike the white oak, which has rounded tips with no little bristle tip. So you can distinguish these trees into two families of the white oak family and the red oak family. White oaks don't have bristle tips on them and red oaks do. So remember, simple leaves, alternately branched, a little fumble there, and then also not only that, but Jeremy will take it away on how you can tell from the buds.
Hey guys, it's Jeremy again. You know, one thing we do at camp, since we're trying to throw so many different tree species down your throat in a week, is we focus on the main species. You know, we do red maple and sugar maple. We don't break down into black and silver, which are other maple species. We do red oak family and white oak family. In the red oak family, you're going to find red oak, black oak, scarlet oak, pin oak, shingle oak, and some others. And then the white oak family has its own group of different tree species, you know, white oak, swamp white oak, bur oak, chestnut oak, and some others as well. So to make it easier, we typically focus on just those main red oak or white oak families. And your red oaks have pointed leaf tips, your white oaks have rounded leaf tips, as Eric has gone through. Hey campers, earlier this week you heard from Dave talking about mad buck, your opposite and your alternate branching. And that's a great way to start learning to figure out what type of tree you're looking at. But if the tree's alternate, we don't have a lot of tips and tricks. But I want to tell you about one of them that's a pretty surefire way to help narrow down your tree list. So if it doesn't fall into your mad buck category, the tree's not an oppositely branched tree, so it's not a maple, ash dogwood, or buckeye. It's an alternately branched tree, and that's a pretty long list of what it could be. But the first thing you should do is look at the tip of the twigs and determine if there's one bud at the tip or if there's multiple buds. If there's, we call it a terminal bud, if there's a cluster of buds, then it's going to fall into the oak family. And I'm going to show you that. It's a little hard to see because the new growth hasn't formed new buds yet, so I had to find a dead branch. But at the tip of this twig, if I can get it into focus here, is more than one bud, and I'm having trouble with the focus. At the very tip of this twig, there you can kind of see it, in that middle one, is not just one single bud, there's a cluster of them, there's a few buds there. And that's what you want to look for. So you know if it is has more than one terminal bud, it's in the oak family. And then the next thing you have to do is determine whether the leaf has rounded leaf tips or pointed leaf tips, to whether it's a white oak or red oak family. And I think Eric's going to teach you more about that. So this one isn't really about tree ID, this is more of a vine. This vine was wrapped around this tree. I just kind of cut it off and unwrapped it. It was way up to the top of this tree. Tree happens to be an ash. We're probably not talking about ash much anymore because they're hard to find. Emerald ash borer killing them all. But it is your ash out of the mad buck. But this vine is Oriental bittersweet, and you can see how it can strangle a tree. From my hand down is all root. You can see how it's kind of orange. There's almost 6 feet of roots that I pulled out of the ground in this thing, which gives you part of the idea of how fast these things can grow or how well they can grow. Oriental bittersweet is a very invasive vine. It's not native to the United States, and whenever possible it should be killed to protect the trees, because it will grow up to the canopy of the trees and start pulling them over and cause some real problems. So.
Don't forget, guys, it's critical in the job that we work. Make sure you stay hydrated. Always a constant reminder of have a good day and way to prevent a bad day. Sitting on a dead tree here, I'll give you a guess on why we might want to be able to identify a dead tree. There's a lot of invasive bugs that are coming through. And this one's pretty tough to identify. Most of the bark's gone. You can actually see where some of the bugs have worked it, some of the wood-boring beetles. But being able just to look at the bark down there, I can identify that this is a dead ash tree. Now most of you already know why it's a dead ash tree. A lot of you have heard about the emerald ash borer. But there's new bugs that are coming around, like the Asian longhorn beetle, spotted lanternfly, many other invasive insects. And being able to identify the trees we have to try to prevent those insects from getting here, or if we have a problem, being able to identify those trees to identify the problem we have, so we can try to get proper control methods on that. And so tree identification goes much more than just being able to say, oh, this is a dead ash, or oh, this is a yellow buckeye. We want to be able to identify why is this a dead ash instead of a standing ash that we might be able to harvest for a baseball bat or Louisville slugger. So tree ID definitely goes a bit further than just knowing what tree is standing there.
Hey guys, it's Jeremy again. The tree I'm going to show you next is called Aspen. It's actually big tooth aspen. Some people call it quaking aspen. And the reason is that the leaf stem is flat. And because the leaf stem is flat, when the wind blows, it can only move in two directions. A normal leaf is just going to flop anywhere it wants to. But with that flat stem, it just kind of waves back and forth. So aspen is a clonal species, meaning that it will grow in large clumps. And if you look around here, this is an old clear cut. All these bigger trees in here are all aspen. They're all about the same size. If you look at the bark when it gets older or bigger, they get kind of rough. As you go higher and higher up the tree, they actually will turn white and get almost glossy. And that's just what aspen does. In the fall, they turn bright yellow, really pretty. And right now, I'm waiting for the wind to blow so you can see them quaking in the wind, and of course it stopped. But aspen really doesn't have any timber value. It is used for paper pulp, but it's very, very low value in the timber value scale. A lot of times it was worth less than it actually cost to haul it out of the woods, so a lot of times it gets left behind, which, depending on your perspective, may or may not be a good thing. I tell a lot of my landowners that I work with that if you want to create some wildlife habitat in your woods and you have a patch of aspen, I mean, this patch of aspen here is probably about 3/4 of an acre. It's all the way around me. If you have a patch of aspen in your woods and you want to create some habitat, just go in and cut them all down. Cut them all down, let them resprout. It resprouts vigorously from the stump and its root system. All these trees are connected into one big root system, and that's kind of unique to aspen. And those stumps will resprout and those roots will resprout and give you some real thick, quick, dense cover. And the other thing that will happen, there's a lot of oak trees in here. Right there's an oak tree. A lot of oak trees in here. There's another leaf, those real bright green leaves right there are oak. But those oaks will then get some more sunlight and take off too. I think you can see that. You see the leaves quaking up there. There they go. That's aspen. So I've been looking around for about 20 minutes on this aspen thing, trying to find you a good leaf. And I've come up with nothing. These trees are too tall and I can't get to a leaf. But I found a dead one from last year. And I'll show you part of a leaf here that's a little bit better indicator of the shape. But you can see from this flat stem, now the wind blows, how this leaf just kind of wants to go in two directions. And if I can get you in close, it's a little bit hard for you to see, I can tell that. But it is a flat stem. There you can see the narrow side and the flat side of it. But that's why it quakes up there instead of just rolling around. And here is the shape of the leaf. It just happens to be the one green leaf I could find is missing the stem. But this is why they call it big tooth aspen. It has really big teeth on it. Kind of a flat base. This leaf isn't fully formed yet. And a really bright white, almost light green really, underside to the leaf that really helps it stand off when it quakes up there in the wind. So that's the rest of big tooth aspen.
This is what I believe is a larkspur. Real pretty flower, has a real unique flower to it, and unique leaves as well. Just a cool thing you might find out in the woods. So this is a hickory and a red oak, two really nice specimen trees. Things that's nice about learning to identify these trees is I can look at these trees. I know north is this way, so this is a north-facing slope. And on my north-facing slope here where I'm located, I can tell you that I've got good hickory growing conditions, good red oak growing conditions, buckeye. I see a few sugar maples. So if you're ever to get to where you want a tree plant, maybe identifying your trees that are already in the area to best understand which trees will be most successful in your planting. Remember, don't try to plant underneath a fully established canopy though. So here we got a couple real nice red oaks. one with the stand in it, and then this one bigger one over here to the right you'll see. And to me, this is what I would think of as a little bit later season food source. The red oaks, they have a lot more tannins in their acorns, so they tend to be a little more sour and bitter. But wildlife will still eat them, but they hit the white oaks first. So I know when I'm out hunting that I might want to sit in my white oak stand first of the season or beginning, and then move my way over to the red oak stand a little later in the season. So that's kind of correlating the wildlife with being able to identify your trees that are here on the property. So tree identification is not only useful for a forester, but whenever it comes to surveying. Maybe your property line's along the row of what's known as wolf oaks, trees that are getting to the size where they're pretty giant and they have big gnarly branches. We have a whole line of wolf oaks through here. But not only that, but they might say, reference a pin that is next to a big giant wolf oak tree. So a lot of times you'll see these trees where your survey stakes or old survey stones are. So tree ID comes in handy for more than just a forester or wildlifer as well. In the red oak family, the way we can tell that is from these bristle tips that you may be able to see. Also, when I rub this leaf, it has like this powder that comes off. Let's see if I can get a good, you can kind of see it there on my fingers. So it's got a bristle tip and almost a powdery mildew on the underside. It almost has what's known as like hairy armpits. This is what's known as a black oak in the red oak family, alternately branched. But the reason I'm looking at this is because it's in the understory of a lot of pine trees. We won't get into pine identification, but there's lots of ways you can identify pines, and we don't have too many. But I want to see if I was to remove these pines silviculturally, what's going to come up underneath. And I've got a lot of black oak, I've got white oak, I have red oak, I have some ash trees, babies, I see some sourwood. So being able to identify these trees is, again, letting me be able to identify what the future stand of timber may be here, or forest. To identify your trees, maybe because you want to try and create better habitat for wildlife, and while doing so you want to keep the trees that are best for wildlife. So right here, you all need to see it unless you really want to, but we'll get up close here in a second. This is what's called an elderberry. It's got what I believe to be a pretty complicated leaf. I don't entirely know for sure, but this is not one of your standard tree species. This one has, to me, it stands out a lot with these warts. That's really what stands out to me as far as identification. This is a really good soft mass producer. It produces elderberries. And so in an area like this where you're, in my landowner objectives and my goals, I want to take an area that's not being very productive for wildlife and try to turn it into a spot that's productive for wildlife. So what we did was we kind of cleared out some non-desirable, non-natives mostly, but non-desirable plants. Took it back to the desirable plants. We're going to try to open this up, and actually I'm going to turn this into a pollinator habitat, and we'll take you up here and look at the hive.
So if you're familiar with the skit that I like to do when I'm teaching tree ID at camp, we call it the red bud skit. If you're familiar with it, this tree will bring you back good memories. If you're not familiar with it, you're just gonna have to come to camp next year, because I'm not doing the skit by myself. But this is the red bud tree, and it has a very unique leaf on it, because if you turn it upside down, it is shaped like a heart. Actually, if you leave it like that, it's shaped like a heart. If you turn it upside down, it's shaped like an upside down heart. So it's been a long day. But this is a red bud tree. It is an understory tree or a woodland edge tree. It doesn't get, it'll get a little bit bigger than this. This one's about 8 feet tall. But the key about it and what it gets its name from is the name redbud is it has a purple flower that comes out in the springtime that is just absolutely gorgeous. You see a lot of it along the interstates. If you see these trees with these purple flowers on it, more than likely it is redbud. And it's still got some leaves coming out. This red color on this leaf isn't normal, except when the trees or leaves are just emerging. It's not a fully grown leaf yet, so that'll turn into just a regular old green like this leaf is. And sometimes they're multi-stemmed. You can see this one has a sprout coming out by the base. And it does get, it's a member of the legume family, the bean family. It does get a seed pod that looks like almost like a flattened green bean. And it's also a nitrogen fixer as it is a member of the bean family. So that is redbud. Hey campers. So another tree I want to show you. I think you've seen it earlier this week if you've watched our other videos. But this is an oppositely branched tree. So it does fall in the mad buck. And if you notice the curved branches, how they kind of always curve up off of the limb there, you may remember that this is dogwood. The reason I want to show you dogwood again, let me walk over here, is there's one real good indicator if you're unsure of how to identify that it's a dogwood tree. You know what that is? It's from its bark.
So here's Beehive. I'm just now starting to kind of learn a little bit about them, so I can't give you a lot of details other than a good friend helped me get it all set up. We're a little low on the syrup water, but one of the things I want to point out about this is a lot of trees are super beneficial to pollinator insects, specifically like our redbud, our flowering dogwood. There's many trees out there that pollinators use. And even though it comes with heavy hearts that Camp Canopy 2020 is not here, know we are here with you in spirit, and we cannot wait until next year at 2021. Hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of a tree ID and a walk in the woods at my place. Hopefully get to see you next year and show you in person. Have a good one, guys. Camp Canopy Sweat Challenge. Make sure you guys go and buy your shirts and your sweaters, because they definitely keep you warm. This shirt, you can't tell, is probably pretty soaked in sweat. But as you guys have got to hear in the earlier introductions, we do have some pretty cool shirts for you guys. The discovery does go on.
Hey campers, I hope you enjoyed some tree ID with us this week. You know, it is really the basis of what foresters do. If we don't know what kind of trees we're working with, we're not going to have a real good idea of how to manage the woods and how those trees grow and how they interact with each other. And it just really is the basic, first building block of good forest management, good wildlife management, and that sort of thing. And even if you're not going to do that and you're going to burn firewood in your house, you really want to make sure whether you're cutting up an oak tree for firewood, a cherry tree, or an aspen tree, because we don't really want to burn aspen too much. So if you enjoyed what you learned this week, I suggest you go pick up a good tree ID book. One of my favorites is the Peterson's Field Guide of the Eastern U.S., mainly because it is a good field guide, but it does focus more on the Eastern United States, trees we're going to have here in Ohio. Some of the books you pick up may actually cover the entire country, and you're going to spend time looking up some oak from Texas and kind of confuse you a little bit. So that'll help narrow it down a little bit. There's some good Ohio tree ID books out there as well. But it takes practice. You know, grab that field guide, head out in the woods. Remember mad buck, remember opposite alternate, remember the terminal buds on oaks, red oak versus white oak, the rounded leaf tips versus the pointed leaf tips. We repeat this stuff a lot just so it helps cement in your brain and helps you remember it. And don't be afraid to reach out to your local forester, your local OSU Extension Office, your Soil and Water Conservation District, the Ohio Division of Forestry, for resources, for help. And above all else, hopefully next year we can get back to normal. I appreciate you bearing with us on these videos. We can tell I'm not a videographer. I'm best suited working around in the woods where I am right now. And we hope we'll see you at Camp Canopy 2021. And have yourself a good summer.